Hello, it's life coach and licensed therapist Robin May, and welcome to the I Believe in Marriage YouTube page. Now, if you have not already, go ahead and hit subscribe. Make sure you give a thumbs up to this video and make sure you share it with your family and friends. This series we are starting is called Ask Robin, and this is the very first question that we are going to address. So again, this is a series that you can make sure that you are submitting your questions. You literally go to ibelieveinmarriage.com/askrobin to submit your questions. All right. This is your opportunity to ask a therapist, a life coach, any question that is pressing on your heart about marriage, about relationships. We got a question in and I want to dive right in. Now, when you submit your question, I give you the opportunity to stay anonymous. And so this is an anonymous question. And I have reworded it a little bit to make sure that I'm protecting the person's identification. All right. So here we go. Robin, I would love you to help me with strategies to create a safe space with my spouse. Now that word right there, safe space, was right up my alley. Okay. The person goes on to say, there are a few hot button issues that come up, particularly in co-parenting, that I can tell triggers my spouse. Because I don't want to get my spouse upset, I tend to avoid those conversations that I know cause them to act differently. But that's not good either, because now I'm excluding my spouse from important discussions. How do I create the safe space to talk to my spouse about this? This was a perfect question. I am so excited to give some suggestions. All right. So first of all, I have some notes in front of me because y'all know this is my passion, so I could talk all day. So first of all, when there are challenges in communication, the issue is rarely the thing we are arguing about. I like to say you have to find the issue behind the issue. So that means you have to try to look beneath the surface of what's really going on, or behind the door of what's being presented. The issue we are arguing about is rarely the issue. It is rarely really about the toilet paper. It is rarely really about who cooked what for dinner. The issue is rarely the issue we are arguing about. But here's the challenge. Many times, whoever is upset, whether it's you or your spouse, who's ever upset or frustrated, who's agitated, just feeling some kind of way, rarely the person is able to acknowledge or be clear on what is really going on. Often the emotions are so high, it's hard to get to the root of what's going on, and that can be frustrating when you're trying to figure out or come up with a solution. So here are some suggestions, all right? First of all, whenever there is a repetitive issue that comes up in your marriage, remember, if you've been rocking with me for a while, I call that an undercurrent. Every marriage has an undercurrent, that issue that keeps showing up that we can't quite seem to get a resolve to. So when you are dealing with an undercurrent, try to be careful about how you respond at the height of the moment. Don't try to get to the root at the height of the argument or at the height of the frustration, because that's going to be really difficult to have a clear-headed conversation. So for example, in this question, the issue is co-parenting. So you bring up something about the child, or you bring up something about the child's biological parent. That is not the moment to try to get to the root of the issue. So what you want to do is try to minimize as much conflict as possible in the moment, but make a mental note. We have to come back to this, all right? So the first suggestion is, don't try to get to the root at the height of the moment. Try to calm things down, make a mental note. We need to revisit that. Even if you say, listen, we don't need to talk about this right now. Let's try to bring it up a little bit later. Here's my second suggestion. Find a good time for the two of you to discuss the situation, y'all. When it's date night, or y'all are just chilling, looking at TV, or you're looking at a movie, that is not the time to bring up a hot button issue. That is going to feel like a setup to your spouse. Your spouse is going to feel like, wait a minute, we're chilling. I'm not ready to have that. Don't come blindly to your spouse about that moment, all right? Try to be careful about when you bring it up. If you and your spouse currently do not have a set time to deal with life stuff, I want you to consider creating that. It's really good if you and your spouse have weekly or bi-weekly meetings to talk about life stuff. And that's the time when you can bring it up. Or if you don't have weekly or bi-weekly meetings, you can ask for time. So for example, hey babe, when's a good time for us to chat? I have something I want us to talk about. Again, you don't want to cause your spouse to be feel like they're being set up. So say, hey, when is a good time for us to chat? Can we talk later on tonight, or can we talk tomorrow? You guys come up with a set time so your spouse can get their minds right and know we're about to have one of those conversations. Here's my third suggestion. Make sure that you are careful how you present the issue. Do not present the issue in a way that feels like an attack, that feels like an accusation, or where you're making assumptions. Let me give you those 3 words again. Be careful how you present the issue. Make sure you do not present it where it feels like an attack, where it feels like you're making an accusation, or where you're making an assumption. Here is a key phrase. I want you to stay curious. Stay curious. I want you to make sure that you are sharing it in a way that you're opening up opportunities for dialogue. So you can say something like this, you know what, babe, I want to make sure that I'm respecting you. And sometimes when I bring this up, whatever the issue is, sometimes when I bring this up, there feels like there's a shift in your mood. Is there something you need me to do differently, or is there something I'm missing? See, you're staying curious. You're not making any accusations. You're even saying, listen, I feel like something shifts. You're not saying, yeah, you start acting funny. You're saying, I feel like something shifts. Make sure you're staying curious. Also, when you're about to have one of those conversations, I want you to prepare in advance for one of these 5 communication blockers, whether it's you doing one of these 5 or whether it's your partner doing one of these 5. The 5 communication blockers are defensiveness, deflecting, dismissing, disrespecting, or shutting down. I want you to pay attention to those. Be careful about those. Make sure that you're not presenting those, and have an idea in plan or in place about what you're going to do if your spouse presents those. Because listen, if you've been married longer than a week, you know whether or not there's a tough conversation if your spouse starts to be defensive, deflecting, dismissing. Make sure you think about in advance how you're going to respond to that. Remember, we teach others how to treat us. And so if you already know, listen, sometimes my spouse starts getting a little bit disrespectful, how are you going to respond to that in advance? Because remember, we're having one of those tough conversations. All right, so those are the 3 suggestions I have for you. Make sure you just hit rewind to hear this again. Practice before you have the conversation. And I want to say this as we close. The person who submitted this question asked the key phrase, how do I create a safe space? Listen, in the communication training that I offer, you can go to ibelieveinmarriage.com/communication to learn about this course and to even invest in it. But the heartbeat of the course is helping you know what it means to create a safe space. Every marriage needs a safe space. A safe space is where we can have tough conversations without fear of retribution, without fear of punishment, without fear of a conflict that cannot ever get to a place of some type of resolution. And I'm pausing there because every conflict is not going to have an easy resolution, but we can get to a place where we can deal with it. That's what a safe space is. Remember, a safe space doesn't just happen. You can't just assume you all have a safe space. A safe space must be created, it must be cultivated, and it must be covered. It must be created. You got to say, we're going to create a safe space for one another. It has to be cultivated. You got to go in there and pull up the weeds of frustration, pull up the weeds of bitterness, pull up the weeds of offense. You have to cultivate it, and then it needs to be covered. That means it needs to be protected. Everybody else can't come into my safe space. That's so important in marriage. And let me end with this. You cannot have a safe space in your marriage if there is no trust, if there's no respect, and if there's no personal responsibility. Trust includes fidelity, but it's far more than just fidelity. A safe space includes respect, and you have to know what respect looks like for you and what it looks like for your spouse. And personal responsibility means I'm going to own up to how I contribute to any chaos that may go on in our marriage. All right. So I hope that helped you. I hope you took some strategies from that and you're going to apply that in your marriage. Remember, you can submit your question too. Go to IBelieveInMarriage.com/AskRobin to submit your question. And we're going to be doing this for several weeks. All right. I cannot wait to be back with you again next week. Don't forget to hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'll talk to you soon.